From the library of the New York Stock Exchange at the corner of Wall and Broad Streets in New York City, you're inside the Ice House, our podcast from Intercontinental Exchange on markets, leadership, and vision in global business. The dream drivers that have made the NYSE an indispensable institution of global growth for over 225 years. Each week, we feature stories of those who hatch plans, create jobs, and harness the engine of capitalism. Right here, right now at the NYSE and at ICE's exchanges and clearinghouses around the world. And now welcome inside the Ice House. Here's your host, Josh King of Intercontinental Exchange.
Since Henry Hudson first sailed into New York Harbor, the corner of Wall and Broad Street has lured ambitious innovators seeking new opportunity. An early business to sprout up in the New World, not necessarily scalable, was fur trading. The Dutch West India Company, one of the first public companies in history, set out to open up the nascent North American business park to investors. In 1624, the Dutch began to trade right here on the corner of Wall and Broad. Where the New York Stock Exchange stands today, you could find beaver pelts from the Pacific Northwest piled high, that is, until animal populations dipped in the early 1800s. But the Dutch were driven out of Manhattan long before the beavers, when the British captured New York in 1664. The area would remain an English colony until the United States declared its independence 112 years later, but fortunately for New York's economy, English rule brought with it a new commodity and a morning ritual: coffee. The trading and consumption of the bitter bean grew quickly, leading to the creation of a coffee exchange that is today a cornerstone of Intercontinental Exchange's network of markets. The caffeinated beverage and ICE's role in its trade has been a topic we've hit here several times, and just like the fur trade before it, coffee eventually made its way to the Pacific Northwest, where it became ingrained in the unique culture of that region. In September 2021, the Dutch returned to Wall Street in force, led by our guest today, Joth Ricci, a very proud Oregon State beaver. The reason for that visit was to celebrate the listing of Dutch Bros Coffee for one of the largest and most entertaining IPOs in recent history of the New York Stock Exchange. Today, Joth Ricci, CEO of Dutch Bros and author of The System, Powers of Five, makes his return to 11 Wall Street to join us inside the Ice House, providing an update on what happened after that memorable IPO, his career journey, and to share some of the lessons codified in his writing. That's coming up right after this.
And now a word from Genpact, NYSE ticker G.
We are currently encountering delivery delays.
Genpact is transforming supply chains using real-time data to help manufacturers keep goods flowing from the warehouse, so cupboards are never bare at their house. We are in the relentless pursuit of a world that works better for people.
Our guest today, Joth Ricci, is president and CEO of Dutch Bros Coffee, NYSE ticker symbol BROS, or Bros. Prior to joining Dutch Bros, he served as president and CEO of Adelsheim Vineyard, president of Stumptown Coffee Roasters, and CEO of Jones Soda Co. Joth serves on the Oregon Governor's Racial Justice Council, sits on the board of the Oregon Business Council, and co-founded Taste for Equity. Welcome, Joth, inside the Ice House.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
So it's been 6 months since the Broistas, led by co-founder Travis Boersma, took over Wall Street for Dutch Bros Coffee's highly successful and, for our perspective, enjoyable IPO celebration. What impact did going public have on the company, or was it just business as usual once the team made its way back to Grants Pass?
I think that the way you captured our memorable celebration here in September, I think that you could say that continued. The whole idea for us going public was to be able to share with all of our people and our employees and create an excitement that we'd kind of made it. And I think there's been a general excitement of I think there's still people pinching themselves Dutch Bros is a public company. I mean, we're from Grants Pass, Oregon, and we're a public company. We did something pretty special. So I think people are excited and proud to share that message, as we've done kind of all over the country now.
As the name suggests, Travis and his brother Dane are of Dutch descent. And for our audience who may not be east of your footprint or may not know the story behind those ubiquitous windmills that dotting the landscape of the West, can you share the company's origin story?
Yeah, so Trav and Dane, two kids that grew up a dairy farmer in Grants Pass. And Grants Pass is about, 250 miles south of Portland. And, as they were kind of growing up, and Dane was about 15 years older than Trav and kind of exploring their way, more or less, they landed on this idea of what was called espresso at the time, with no Starbucks to be found anywhere in the area. And they decided to test their entrepreneur skills, and they opened up a push cart in downtown Grants Pass to sell coffee. While the product was what they had, what they really were selling was service and relationships and bringing people into something that had a lot more to do with relationships and people and treating people well. And the coffee just kind of came along with it. From that day in February of 1992, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary. And that really has been the origin of what this business is about and has carried through for the last 30 years. And I think even to this day, with 15,000 plus employees and now serving as far east as Tennessee, I think you would still find kind of that spirit that Trav and Dane had on day one. I think that spirit is still true today across the 565 locations that we have.
Those 565 locations, Dutch Bros offers a wide selection of beverages, including a colorful assortment of energy and blended drinks with names that could be both an NFT collection and a beverage. How do you take customer feedback and turn that into new products?
Our customers and our broistas are mainly responsible for the naming and the creation of our drinks. We share a pretty limited menu as far as the categories that we sell, but there are thousands of drinks on what we call our secret menu that really have been created by so many different people along the way. We get submissions all the time on new drinks, new ideas, because really we're about customizing what you want every day, and we come up with some pretty fun names, as you mentioned.
I mean, thinking about what we're seeing now on the headlines, the way energy prices are spiking, in addition to attracting customers, I imagine the diversification of the company's offerings has to sort of serve as a hedge against rising coffee costs. But do you see headwinds for your drive-through stands from the recent rise in both coffee bean and gas prices?
A third of our business is done in espresso-based drinks. So, coffee technically makes up a pretty small percentage of our overall cost of goods. So we're not concerned about it. And, I think when you live in the coffee world, you're used to the C price going way up and way down. And you just kind of have to live in that commodity space. I think related to fuel prices, most of our stands are within a kind of a person's daily life, right? So it's on the way to school or on the way to work or, something that you're not going to stop doing anyway. So I think that from the kind of the bubble that people live in, most of our stands kind of work within that bubble. We'll see a little bit of hit related to kind of road trips. On the West Coast, we have a stand that I hear about all the time in Davis, California. That's if you're driving from the Bay Area to Tahoe, everyone says, "Well, I stop at that Dutch, on my way to Tahoe." Well, the road trip, may go down a little bit here as gas prices are high, but I think for daily living, wouldn't expect us to see much of a change.
I did that road trip from San Francisco to Tahoe last winter during a driving blizzard. Not the kind of thing you want to do without chains on the tires and a good cup of coffee in the coffee holder. For an industry with an average employee turnover of more than 100%, Dutch Bros has not had that issue, filling open positions that many of your competitors have not been able to fill. What's your secret for both attracting and, more importantly, keeping that talent?
In the fourth quarter of this year, I think our stand turnover was around 56%, which, as you mentioned, is very low in the industry. And I think a lot of it is just like, I think we treat people well. I mean, and there's no magic sauce here, right? I mean, I think that when you treat people well, you create a great work environment. We have a fun spirit inside of our stands where people feel like they're part of something. The music's great. You get free Dutchware. You get treated very well. You get a great interaction with customers. We pay a good wage. I think our people, work off of tips. And, I think it's kind of the combination of a lot of things. And our whole program at Dutch Bros is we want to make the broista the hero. And so when they're at the window and they're talking to the customer, for everything that we do every day inside of HQ, our job is to make sure the barista stays the hero. And I think that we set up a great environment for them to work in.
I mean, if they are working directly for you, it's a little easier. If they're part of your direct team, it's a little easier. And historically, franchises were only drawn from Dutch Bros' employee pool, but that's something I read you're moving away from. Last year, the company opened 98 locations, and on your last earnings call, you forecasted an increase of at least 25% this year. What's the outlook for 2022, and can you expand on your decision to keep franchising only a small part of your future growth?
So one, the franchising decision was made, almost a decade ago, where the company would no longer franchise. And the great part about our franchise system is that every one of those people grew up at Dutch Bros. They were amazing operators and really were granted the opportunity to franchise, whether that was in Redding, California, or Boise, or Phoenix, or Las Vegas at the time. Really, what the decision, the flip has been made is just that Trav wanted to have more control. He wanted to have, felt like that if you put a good team around him, that we could kind of move away from the franchise model and move into the company-owned model. And that's really where we've been over the last 5 years, is moving more into company-owned, and we'll continue to do that. And of the 125 locations that we laid out for 2022, about 100 to 105 of those will be company-owned, and we'll continue to kind of scale that over time.
You quote Ted Lasso in your book saying, "Be curious, not judgmental." I'm not sure how long it took Dutch Bros to make it the 175 miles from Grants Pass to Corvallis, but do you remember the first time you were curious and had that coffee? Notwithstanding Coach Lasso, what was your judgment of the stuff?
My first experience with Dutch Bros was probably 20 years ago, and I believe, if I remember right, it was in Coos Bay, Oregon, which is on the coast, and I was working for a beverage distributor, and I was doing store checks along the Oregon coast, and I ran into this small coffee shop called Dutch Bros, and I don't even think that I had seen it prior to that or experienced it. I had just moved back to Portland and kind of missed the whole 90s growth of Dutch Bros, so I didn't even know anything about it. What I loved about Dutch, remember from that day, was the service and what that was about, and I think that experience kind of left something with me. And even as I went to Stumptown and was on a very different part of the coffee journey, we loved what Dutch Bros was about and what Dutch Bros was doing as far as bringing people into the coffee and the beverage category. So it's been fun. I've been curious about Dutch Bros from a long time, and then I got the phone call.
Was the arrival of Coach Lasso to Apple Plus for you the manifestation of the modern John Wooden? Let's take a listen.
I had 3 rules pretty much that I stuck with practically all the time. I'd learned these prior to coming to UCLA, and I decided they were very important. One was never be late. Never be late. Later on, I said certain things that I had the players, if we're leaving someone, they had to be neat and clean. There was a time when I made them wear jackets and shirts and ties, and then I saw our chancellor coming to school in denims and turtlenecks, and I thought it was a little not right for me to keep this other, so I let them they had to be neat and clean. And I had one of my greatest players that you probably heard of, Bill Walton. He came and gets the bus. We were leaving for somewhere and to play, and he wasn't clean and neat, so I would let him go. He couldn't get on the bus. He had to go home and get cleaned up to get to the airport if he could. So I was a stickler for that. I believed in that. I believe in time, very important.
Time, very important. Bill Walton is off the bus, sort of the way Coach Lasso disciplines Jamie Tart.
I think that the Woodenisms, and just there's so many of them that he had, and great lessons and the way that he did things. And I really just enjoyed his whole piece on preparation. And I think that, what's interesting about the Ted Lasso series is that a lot of the clips or the filming of Ted Lasso is done on the practice field and in the locker room. It's not necessarily so much about the game. I think that the outcome of the games are such a small percentage of what the whole Lasso series was done. And I think that the writing in Lasso was spectacular. And so kind of bringing those together is, I don't think I've ever really bridged the Wooden to Lasso thing, but now that you bring it up, there's a lot there.
Well, don't be late and be neat and clean is what Coach and what Ted and Beard do on the field. I mean, they're not doing the geometry of soccer the way you think about the geometry of basketball. They're talking about human beings and their relationships.
For me, I think the influence from Coach Wooden and just the readings, and obviously I never met him and never got a chance, but really studying kind of what he was about, I think that he taught us people how to put their socks on right, because that he knew that would give their feet better performance. And I think one of the quotes in the book is, the coach doesn't play the game, right? So as I've translated that into business, For me, it's about like teaching the skills of being a great business person. I'll let you execute the way that you need to do it, but I'm going to help you figure out and almost practice the things that you need to do to get better.
You never met Coach Wooden, but you grew up in the shadow of another great basketball program, Oregon State, where your parents, you, and some of your kids attended. And we're recording this on the morning after the Civil War was renewed, with the University of Oregon knocking Oregon State out of the Pac-12. A good day for your wife, the lone duck in the family, but what does state mean to you?
It's been an awful basketball year for Oregon State, and I was getting questions why I wasn't in Las Vegas watching the Beavers play the Ducks, and I said, the last thing I want to do is end my season with a loss to the Ducks. It would ruin me for 6 months if that happened. So, Oregon State, I was actually born on campus and really grew up in that town, and I think that being part of that community, being part of that basketball program in the late 70s and 80s, I can tell you the day that we were named number one in the country. I can tell you where I was and what I was doing. A lot of the discipline of Ralph Miller and the work that he did in the 80s with Gary Payton and beyond had a lot of influence in my life. Oregon State means the world to me. I sit on a couple of boards of schools there right now on food science and education, and will continue to do whatever I can to advance that work that they do because of what they gave to me.
As you draw a line, though, from Naismith to Ralph Miller to John Wooden, as reflected in the system, how does basketball mirror life?
It's about paying attention to detail. It's about being in the right places. It's about observing the wholeness of the space versus just thinking about yourself. I think that, in basketball, if you're an individual and you try to take on everybody else, you won't be successful. If you understand that it's about a team and it's about spacing and it's about everybody has a role, and that you have to be aware of different people and the emotional intelligence of everybody. Very, very similar to how that plays out.
After graduating from Oregon State, I read that your mother was one of the first employees at the Corvallis HP plant. How did your mom and where you grew up influence the type of leader and business person that you would eventually become?
Yeah, my mom was and still is a very special lady. She would do anything for us growing up. She was an educator she got her degree in education, and after having my brother actually lost her job in the early 70s and wasn't able to go back to teaching. And so she was figuring out which way to go, and she landed with this new company in town called Hewlett Packard. And I think that my mom's drive to do things well, her work in community, the way that she advanced at Hewlett Packard to the place that she became in Corvallis, I think was always inspirational to me. And we did things right. She was very disciplined with us as far as growing up and how we treated people, how we showed up, the way that we were. And so she had a lot of influence on what we've done, and she had a great career at Hewlett Packard. And I was just talking with her the other day. She's finally at 75, no longer agreeing to lead philanthropic efforts anymore. But that's at 75. She's finally figured out that maybe it's time for her to take a step back. So she's a special lady. One
of the first jobs that you had was at a very different NYSE-listed company, Johnson & Johnson, that's ticker symbol JNJ. But initially you had accepted a job like your mom to be a teacher and a coach. How did you end up in business instead? My degree is in business education. I just wanted to be a basketball coach and a teacher, and I was doing some side work in the summer to kind of fill in, and get some income. And I was just doing any grunt job that would get thrown my way at a food brokerage in Portland, Oregon. And I was taking out trash, I was changing light bulbs, I was resetting categories, and I did a project for one of our account managers, and she had just come from McNeil Consumer Products and had taken a job at the broker. And she said, hey, I can get you an interview with McNeil, who I just came from, but I think, they've got somebody already slated, but it'd be a great experience for you as you're getting a teaching job. And so fast forward, one of the questions I got asked that kind of, I think, advanced me was the interviewer had said, hey, you've never sold or been in business before. What makes you think you'd be a great salesperson? And I said, well, have you ever stood in front of a classroom of 16-year-olds and try to convince them that what you're saying is important? And I said, to me, that's selling. So the idea of being in a classroom, understanding different learning skills and having a very advanced learner versus somebody who was slow to pick things up, really what that's done for me is I've taken that application and been able to apply that to business. And I took the job with J&J. I was going to get to go to the Yankee Stadium and see the Yankees play, and I'd never been to New York, and that was part of the initial training program. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. I can always come back and teach. I'm curious from J&J how your career developed from there and what eventually brought you not just to the beverage industry, but back west with Columbia Distributing Company, that role that you were driving up and down the coast and suddenly you walk into a Stumptown stand.
9.5 years with McNeil Consumer Products. I tell people I grew up in business working for the people that dealt with the Tylenol tampourines of the 80s. And what a great education that was, and the way I was treated. I got a chance to live all over the country, and my daughter was born in LA, my son in Philadelphia. And I came home from work one day, I looked at my wife and I said, you know what? I'm from the Northwest. So I took a chance. I'm 32 at the time, and basically started my career over. And I went home and got connected through a couple people to the founder of Columbia Distributing. And he looked at me and he said, you know what, I have no idea what to do with you. I've never hired anybody outside the beverage industry, but if you take a chance, I will. I'll help you get home and let's see what happens. And 2 years later, I was the GM of that business, and we had 6,000 employees and one of the largest, most dynamic beverage distribution businesses in the country.
I'm a bit of a beverage nerd myself. I've been to a couple BevNets, and I remember clearly this product, Jones Soda, and the very striking bottles and the photographs that were on those labels. And one of your big opportunities as CEO of Jones Soda Company, really a trial by fire experience with the founder being ousted on your first day. That left you in charge of a public company with a stock price really that was unsustainable. Were you able to take anything from that experience as you led Dutch Bros through its IPO?
Without a doubt. I think that, as everyone will point out, I mean, the biggest lessons you learn is from the hardest times. And going from a very successful run at Columbia to a very challenging time at Jones Soda, I think I went into that job having no idea what I was walking into. But you know what, you wake up every day, you figure things out. And I learned a lot about public company. You know, we had a shareholder lawsuit. The founder had misrepresented a lot of things that we were doing. But inside all of that, the brand was still pretty special. So how do you save a brand despite all the noise around it and keep your team focused on the things that we need to do every day and try to shield them from maybe some of the challenges that were happening? I think as I went to Dutch and we started to prepare this idea of going public, there were a lot of lessons that I learned from the Jones Soda days to bring in. And I think that one is that Dutch Bros is a special company. I've said from the beginning we weren't going to get drugged to the mean by going public. And we got to make sure that that specialness of even who we were the day that we came here to celebrate the IPO, you know, we wanted to make sure that we were special, we maintained who we were and kind of what got us here. And we were going to be very disciplined and very honest about who we were and who we weren't and why we were going to do things. And I think people have respected that along the way.
You and I have been talking so much about being a teacher. You take lessons to First Beverage, you take lessons to Jones, and all these things feed in your next gig at Stumptown, where you helped launch the cold brew frenzy and then met the Dutch Bros team. What was your first impression when you met them?
Trav and I would tell you the story that we both weren't real crazy about that meeting because he thought he was bringing his team up to a very pretentious third wave coffee company. And I thought we were bringing up this group that's like, I don't even know what those guys do every day. Like that no one even knows who they are. Like they live in Grants Pass. Like, what are we doing here? And what Trav and I figured out very quickly is that we were very much the same people. And he was shocked by just how hospitable and actually nice we were. And we were shocked actually about how much they knew and how good they were. And we shared a lot of insights related to the category and to cold brew. And Trav and I both remember that day very much.
As we head into the break, Joth, you see a pattern somewhat in your career as you went to Jones, Adelsheim Winery, and now Dutch Bros, succeeding the founders as the leader. One of the hardest jobs to do, we've seen it a lot. Why have you been so adept at doing that, and why do you think so many have trusted you with their life's work?
I think that somehow my approach feels good to a founder. I try not to be a dominant personality. I come in and I'm very much about figuring things out. I'm very respectful of the founder's body of work. I take an approach to teaching. So what I try to do, and I've actually never terminated anybody that I've inherited from a founder. If they choose to leave and they don't like where we're going, that's a different story. But you know, my approach and really with the founder has been, hey, I can come in and actually elevate your team. As most of the founders, and one of the commonalities is that I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I need somebody else to come in to help me elevate the business. And that's been very common across all those companies. And this is my sixth go-around.
Sixth go-around. Here we are at Dutch Bros. After the break, Joth Ricci, CEO of Dutch Bros Coffee, and I talk about the system for that sixth go-around and the power of five and how it can help anyone live their best life. That's right after this.
And now a word from Fiverr, NYSE ticker FVRR.
Hi, we're Fiverr, a global marketplace connecting individuals and businesses with freelancers offering thousands of digital services. Graphic design, web development, video editing, e-commerce marketing. You name it, there's a professional freelancer ready to make it happen. Filter your search by the service needed, budget, timeline, and boom! Fiverr provides a list of talented freelancers to meet your specific needs. Always know what you'll pay up front. No hourly rates, just project-based pricing. And because payment isn't released until you approve the work, you can rest assured that you'll be satisfied with the quality and get exactly what you want. Our support team is always available to answer questions or offer assistance when you need it. With the whole world of freelance talent at your fingertips, what might you achieve? Join today and find out. Fiverr. It starts here.
Welcome back. Before the break, Joth Ricci, CEO of Dutch Bros Coffee, and I took a caffeinated tour of his career and examined how Dutch Bros went from a cart to the largest IPO in Oregon history. So over the course of our conversation so far, it's clear that your career has been focused on teaching others, but why was now the right time to codify those ideas in this book?
You do this enough times, and there were enough changes that I've been through, and I actually was with another CEO in Portland, and we had been meeting, and he said, hey, someday, I'd love to have you walk me through your system. And I looked at him and I said, actually, that's a really good question. I don't even know how I would answer that. He said, whatever you've been doing seems to be working pretty well. I think it'd be great to learn how you do it and what you do. So that got me thinking about actually at this stage of my career, and I've got kids now that are young adults, and maybe I should put down on paper what it is that I do and how I think, and hopefully if I can just help a few people think differently about what they do or really how they organize. And I think what it came to is that I think every leader should have a system. They should understand what their system is. They should understand why it is that they do what they do, and I think it helps them be pretty clear with their people. And for me, that this was a gift to my team and to our extended team to basically be very clear on, hey, this is how I run things, this is how I do things, and if you're going to be really successful in my system, these are my expectations for you. And that's how we got started with it.
For listeners, obviously, who can't see the system, this work that Joth has put together, you can refer to it as a book for lack of some kind of a better descriptor, but the pages, pullouts, activities, doodle pages certainly don't look like the typical CEO manuscript. We've had a lot of them in this room talking about their traditional written words on many chapters. How did you come up with a format?
I did not want a book. So when I took the idea to the team that helped me put this together, I told them, I said, the last thing we're going to do is a traditional business book, because I think the world doesn't need another one of those. I said, so what I wanted to design thinking to be incorporated into a business book. I wanted short lines, quick reading, because I really felt like, especially for younger leaders, that's the world that a lot of our younger leaders are working in. So in 200 character texts or less and things of that nature. And then I want a lot of color and inspiration. And so every piece of art that is in the book, we spent a lot of time on the art and the creation of that. It's really with design thinking in mind. And so, I believe that when you're looking at art or when you're looking at some sort of design, your brain is actually working in a way that unlocks things for you that you don't even know is happening. So we wanted to have things that were inspiring, interesting, and hopefully would get you thinking a little bit about what you do.
So this is what you can read in that period between 5:30 a.m. and 5:55 a.m. personal recreational reading book, right?
Correct. And it's been fun. They said, well, let's do a day in the life and show kind of how you operate. And I think it's one question I think that's really good, especially for a lot of younger leaders in the audience, is like, what's your day like? What we wanted to do is kind of get personal and show well, this is how I live my day as a CEO of a public company. This is how I have to be organized. And I spend a lot of time in the morning actually preparing for my day. I don't get up and go to work. I actually get up and prepare, kind of get my brain ready and my body ready and be ready for the day that's ahead of me.
Another beverage entrepreneur that I know, Seth Goldman, codified his hard lessons learned in a book that he called Mission in a Bottle. which is really essentially a graphic novel about the founding of Honest Tea. And I often think about this, Joth. Is there something about the brain wiring of an entrepreneur that needs to communicate in a different way?
I think the short answer to that is yes. And Seth is an amazing person with incredible energy and has built an incredible brand and actually probably done things even way beyond that. He gets the credit for Honest Tea, but I think the work that he's done outside of that is probably even more special.
On page 37 of the system, you say, "A letter to my future self. I commit to the following changes over the next year." You help the writer out by saying, "Dear future me, comma," and the rest of the page is blank, and it says, "Please take a photograph of this page with your phone and email it to me at thesystem@dutchbros.com, and we'll be in touch in a year's time." Any feedback yet?
We've had some great letters come in. Again, we've distributed 200-300 of these books, and it's up to you. I think that none of this is required. It's really more about how do the thoughts in here inspire you. And I think that the letter in there, comes out of the idea of the personal values grid and some of the balance pyramid and how you think about leading your life. And what we found is we've had some very thoughtful emails come in with some perspective on this opened up my idea about this, or this is a great time in my life that I want to do this. And that was the whole idea, is that can you hold yourself accountable to the changes, or are you just going to read a book and put it up on the shelf and decide not to do anything with it? So we wanted to create some accountability with that.
Wooden talks as much about being an English teacher as he does being a basketball coach. And as a guy who's been in corporate communications for a long time, I have been in the midst of a lot of exercises designed to write company values. And sometimes they are one word and sometimes they're a long paragraph. And I love the construction of the personal values grid: personal characteristics, organizational mindset, personal skills, organizational expectations. Got that one word and then a pretty brief descriptor phrase. Was this your own mental exercise to come up with?
Yeah, it was. And really the cross-section of that is communication and listening. And I think that when you go back to personal values, and what I wanted to do was take the top half of that grid and talk about you, and then I want to take the bottom half of that grid and talk about teams and people. And so, you need to understand and keep it to 5, because I think beyond that you just lose, you don't remember those things. And so we want to keep it very simple and really, what are the things that you can do? How are the things that you need to be able to do in order to contribute to a great organization? And so the top half is about you, the bottom half is about the team, and making sure that you understand that communication and listening are the two things that can make you great and also break it down.
Is there a particular quartile or any of these particular 20 single words that you'd love to see your employees excel in?
I grew up in business really with the idea and the concept of emotional intelligence. It's stuck with me from the beginning. It stuck with me. And so I talk a lot about emotional intelligence and awareness. And for my employees and for especially for my leaders, I think the awareness of situation, the awareness of how people are doing, the awareness of what's going on around you. Do you see things? Do you understand when you walk into a room? I think a leader can destroy a room and a leader can elevate a room. But if a leader isn't aware or understanding the people dynamics of what's happening, I don't think you can be a great leader. And probably those things, for me, of those 20 things, those would be the 2 things I would point to.
One of the most interesting parts of the book is about capacity. Do you think as a society we have maybe an overcapacity epidemic?
Counter to that, I think we are an undercapacity society. I think that most people don't realize their capacity. I think that we're consumed with noise, and I think we've allowed the noise to become what in our minds is capacity and overload. And I think that we haven't done a really good job of really exploring what the true capacity of ourselves are. And I see it all the time. I really believe that there's a lot more that people can do if you find the right things in them to kind of unlock and get them thinking a little bit differently.
Talking about unlock and getting people to think a little bit differently, the book is sort of playful, but it's pretty complex. And I've been part of organizations where the leader and the human resources department talks and provides materials about how this is going to be a matrix organization. But, it sounds okay as it comes off those lips, but it's a little hard to get your arms around. You've proven yourself with this book and your system to kind of be a master of that. But for an everyday listener, how do you get people excited about what often goes over their heads as they hear from human resources, we're going to be a successful matrix organization.
The interesting thing about using the word matrix is all you're really doing is identifying what we're doing every day anyway. And some of the biggest failures of working in a matrix and working on teams is actually just the fundamentals of people. Because you have to live in a matrix organization to run a great company. At least I personally believe that. But in order to live in a matrix, you have to think about others more than you think about yourself. You have to think about what you do and how you affect things and how you change things. And I think as the book was coming together, it became very clear to me that the person who was going to teach this and live this for our organization was me. And so if I didn't live it, if I didn't own it, if I wasn't that person, and I put it on paper. So every meeting I walk into, every piece of communication I have, now I've established the expectation that you should hold me accountable to what I'm asking you to do. And I'm just going to, and I will teach you the things that you don't know, or even some of the characteristics that I don't see in you that I think will make you a great teammate in a matrix. Yeah, and it never stops. You can't, I think one of the mistakes people make, and to your point, is the HR team or the leader, you run a workshop and this is how you do it. Okay, now go do it. Right? And that's the biggest mistake you can make, because no one's going to change behavior to do that. I think great leaders have to live it every day and hold their people accountable.
Talking about the way we work every day, Zoom fatigue is something that's become part of the corporate nomenclature. But whether you're working in person or remote, I find most of my day spent in meetings, online, in person. Can you explain to our listeners what you mean by meeting DNA and how it's helped your company use time efficiently?
I think from a meeting DNA, I think that, one of the things I talk to my team about, and I talk to other leaders about, is that, to your point, we spend a lot of time in meetings. I mean, honestly, and meeting efficiency, from a leadership standpoint, it actually should be a top 3 things that you should focus on. Like, how do I get more time? How do I use my time more efficiently? How do I make sure that I'm not wasting my time in meetings? So I think it's about, did you invite the right people? Do people understand why they're there? Can you do this in 30 minutes or less? Could all of this been done via email and you actually didn't need to meet in the first place? And I think that if we all figured out a way to just run meetings better, we would free up so much time in our day and in our week and our year to run better companies and to give better kind of quality of life to people. Because I think we're all, listen, even pre-COVID, we're all tired of sitting in meetings, especially bad ones. Nothing can drag down the culture or the development of an organization by just honestly having bad meetings.
The system, your work here that we're talking about, based mostly on fives and geometry, except for the introduction of trimesters. And now that you're managing a public company, you are changing how your system works in your day-to-day to match a quarterly cadence. How do you sort of chip away at fives to allow for trimesters and for quarters?
Our planning system and the way that we do things is on trimesters. And a lot of that is just based on, is that quarters are too short from a planning system and from an execution system. And if you don't have to plan 4, then plan 3. And the way that our business works and the seasonality of our business, it works better in a trimester system. From a quarterly standpoint, that's really just reporting to the outside. I don't run my business on quarters. Unfortunately, we have to report quarterly, which puts our accounting and finance team in a different cadence, but actually doesn't affect the way our marketing and operations team runs the business. So, some of that you just have to kind of play out and say, we're going to do one thing like this over here, we're going to do another thing that's best for the business over here, and manage it. And the geometric shape side of the system is really more about spacing and really more about balance, because every geometric shape, whether it's a triangle or a dodecahedron, in order for it to be a geometric shape, it has to have appropriate spacing. And so I think that the lesson there is making sure that you keep things appropriately spaced and balanced, so that if you get overweighted in one way, that shape will lose its presence and not be able to function.
As we wrap up here and still clinging to that idea of meeting DNA, I've been asking all the questions, but are there second questions that I've been missing?
I think in every topic there are second questions. I think that the curiosity of people, and as I've stated, you learn a lot more from the second question than you do the first. And it was a lesson I was given in interviewing 30 years ago. And I believe that holds true today in any conversation. I think that if you find that people aren't asking second questions, then one, they may not be paying attention. 2 is that this is a transactional relationship versus a relationship of curiosity. And I really look for my people to be curious and be paying attention if they're asking more questions and they want to learn more, they want to understand more. It makes for better conversation and much deeper conversation and much deeper learning in an organization.
Well, I have one more second question. The book ends with a selected reading list, most of which are not surprising, like John Wooden's How to Play the Game the Right Way. But one suggestion stood out. Let's play a little clip.
Not in a house, not with a mouse. I would not eat them here or there. I would not eat them anywhere. Yuck. I would not eat green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am.
Joth, why is Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham a must-read for you?
Green Eggs and Ham is the best business book ever written. When you break it all down about how to be successful in business, it is about understanding why your customer doesn't like what you do and how you position yourself to a point until you convince that customer that what you have is what they want. And if you just boil it all down and you think about Green Eggs and Ham and you think about the motivation, the curiosity, the questioning, the positioning, the way that he does things, at the end of the day, it's really all you need to know.
It may be all that you need to know, but we've been talking at length about a very interesting piece of work called The System Power of Five, not available at your local bookstore. For listeners interested in The System, sign up for early access at www.thesystem.co. The masterclass digital experience and book will be released in the coming months, and net proceeds will benefit the Dutch Bros Foundation Education Fund. It's been a great conversation, great visit. Great to have you back here after your IPO, and good luck with the rest of your investor meetings here in New York.
Thank you, and this is a special place, and thanks for having me.
And that's our conversation for this week. Our guest was Joth Ricci, President and CEO of Dutch Bros Coffee, NYSE ticker symbol BROS, B-R-O-S. If you like what you heard, please rate us on iTunes so other folks can know where to find us. And if you've got a comment or a question you'd like one of our experts to tackle on a future show, email us at icehouse@ice.com or tweet at us at icehousepodcast. Our show is produced by Pete Ash with production assistance from Stefan Capriel, Ken Abel, and Ian Wolfe. I'm Josh King, your host, signing off from the library of the New York Stock Exchange. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.
Information contained in this podcast was obtained in part from publicly available sources and not independently verified. Neither ICE nor its affiliates make any representations or warranties, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information and do not sponsor, approve, or endorse any of the content herein, all of which is presented solely for informational and educational purposes. Nothing herein constitutes an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy any security, or a recommendation of any security or trading practice. Some portions of the preceding conversation may have been edited for the purpose of length or clarity.